Welcome back to our discussion about HIV/AIDS on World AIDS Day, the 26th World AIDS Day ever, December 1st. We ended the last segment with you saying stigma, 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 and I think about my own experience living with HIV since '92 and kind of how that has evolved. I'm curious kind of what pulled you into HIV in the start and your own kind of connection to that.
Yeah, well, I actually had the great fortune, really, to do street outreach work back in the late 80s and early 90s here in D.C. And unfortunately had the experience of having so many of my close friends die as a result of complications related to AIDS. And so what I did was I went out into the streets. I think I was probably one of the first, if not the first, lesbian out in D.C. streets. Going into neighborhoods, particularly dealing with drug users, because I had my own history around substance abuse and had recovery, and was able to bring that experience to be able to go into, particularly into the Black community and talk about AIDS. It was really intense, Michael. We had this piece of literature that said blacks on the front, and it was so controversial. I mean, really, who knew what was in it? Like, even just saying blacks on the front, and people were like, well, what you talking about? What do you mean? And it was very provocative, and people wanted to know what was in the literature, and it was blacks and HIV and AIDS.
Well, so let me actually, and I want to talk about, so this World AIDS Day, the theme is focus, partner, and achieve. And it's amazing. At times I feel like we've really lost focus. People don't realize in the U.S., 1 out of every 300 Americans today is living with HIV.
Wow.
And when you realize that 2/3 of those infections are gay, bisexual, other men who have sex with men, and a lot of transgender women, our community's been slammed, and it grows. And so I'm interested from your experience, where you think we need to be focused and across the continuum from prevention, treatment, et cetera.
Well, I mean, I think people need to recognize that it's preventable and that it's treatable. And that really one of the things that we're really struggling with the most is that not enough people know that it's preventable and treatable.
Right.
So it's like the response to stigma is in some ways education. Really making sure that the media and everyone is involved. Do you remember, I know you do, based on your story and what you're sharing with me, how much attention was on this issue? Right. I mean, it was everywhere.
I started doing work in 1992 when I tested HIV positive. I said I was not going to focus on HIV because I felt there was such a focus there, and instead I needed to focus on lesbian, gay, bi, transgender youth. And now here we are having the debate about how do we get the LGBTQ community re-engaged in HIV.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is the challenge. Right. There have been things that have issues, that policy issues that have come up. Obviously people have been very much focused on things like marriage and all of that.
Important issues.
And I'm not saying I'm not saying these aren't important issues. These are very important issues. Broad non-discrimination protections, all of the things that we have been concerned about. Hate crimes obviously continue to be an issue.
And then sometimes, though, I feel like we've taken the focus where it's easier in ways. I mean, if you think about, we have an epidemic that is turning more concentrated, mostly majority people of color, much among poverty, and the complexity of issues there as opposed to when you're working on singular policy issues. We want to pass a law. When you're working on HIV, you're talking about so many different issues. It gets really hard to dig in there, but without these conversations, we don't get there, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I think there are very complex issues there, and I think that's part of what plays into the conversation we were having before about stigma, too, that it's not just one thing. I mean, when you talk about the people who are being impacted, of course, the thing that I think about is you're talking about men of color, and these are the very same people who are being impacted and devalued in other ways in our society. Right. So, in fact, you're right. Even if we want to address some of the other issues that we've been talking about, it really is time for us to look at, okay, what is going on with our devaluing of these people in our population? Of course, this is just my way of thinking about it.
Right.
And maybe if we came at it from that
Right.
angle, we
Right.
might be able to address not only
Right.
HIV, but some of the other
Right.
horrific issues that are facing us, including things like what happened in Ferguson and Trayvon Martin and all these
All
kind
of
of things.
that.
So, I mean, I guess the thing that I would say is that we know it's preventable.
Right.
We know that we can do something different. We know that there's treatment available that will help to take care of the people who are faced with HIV. So we need to do the work that we can do in the LGBT community to make sure that people know that they can prevent HIV and treat HIV. And hopefully we'll talk a lot more about this and other issues around World AIDS Day in the next segment of our conversation. So
Great.
thank you.
Thank you.